Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're here talking about the Seller Velocity Conference, which is May 1st and 2nd, New York City. I'm Chris McCabe of e-commerce Chris, and I'm here with Becky from Ecom Engine. Becky, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks again to Ecom Engine for sponsoring. You've sponsored a few years running in Seller Velocity. This spring, May 1st and 2nd in New York. I am curious what you think people will be asking Ecom Engine about in terms of concerns, pain points, problems they're having trouble resolving, things they can't get their heads around in terms of, the entire year of 2024, of course. But what do you think in the next 2-3 months, customers and clients of yours are going to be primarily focused on and going to you for help?
Well, I will just quickly say before I get into that, we are a proud
Yeah.
sponsor of the Seller Velocity Conference because we love the small, intimate feel and the fact that people come away with actionable insights and strategies. I think there are a lot of really great conferences out there, but I think Seller Velocity has something really special. So we're excited to see what happens
Thank
this
you.
year.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're seeing a ton about FBA fees. This minimum order level metric with FBA sellers. That's a big one that people are concerned about. There's a lot.
Yep.
Like I just created a downloadable guide about all of the date that are happening this year for FBA fees because there is so much to keep track of. I rewrote our article. I have my roots in content management, and I think I spent
Right.
6 hours just trying to parse what Amazon was talking about. So there is a lot
That's
changing.
an excellent place to start.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not in your head if you're feeling confused or, something seems overly complicated. There's a lot happening. We've got capacity limits. We've got a lot going on with changes to aging inventory and just different pieces moving, and it's a lot to keep track of. Um, we're seeing
Hmm.
a lot about Amazon warehousing and distribution. And
Yeah.
as a Amazon nerd, I'm really interested to see where that goes myself. Seems like there's more and more of a push to that. Just if you're one of those people like me that's reading a lot of Amazon policy, there is a lot like, well, there's this fee, but it doesn't apply if you're doing AWD, right? And so it seems like
Right.
kind of like we were seeing with FBA maybe 5 years ago, we're seeing, I think, that big picture push to AWD. And I'm interested to see how that works out for sellers and brands because I can see pros and cons. Um, yeah, and we're seeing a
Hmm.
lot about unauthorized listing or unauthorized resellers on listings, a lot of
Yeah.
hijacking, a lot of concerns over that. Our Seller Pulse tool helps you monitor for different issues with your listing. So we get a lot of customers that are coming up and saying, hey, I had this weird situation. And so we're seeing all kinds of fun things, which I'm sure you are too over at e-commerce, Chris.
Oh, for sure. I mean, so that for the Seller Pulse tool, I mean, what do they understand the dynamics of how to properly report unauthorized resellers, how not to do it? I mean, you must have discussions at length
Yeah.
with people based on the confusion that I've seen. I'm not saying I have the exact same conversations you do, but it's a topic that never really cools off.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I'm assuming a lot of that type of topic works its way into your newsletter. I mean, newsletters are sort of circling back as a hot craze right now. So maybe we're all revamping our newsletters. But what changes are you planning, or areas of focus, shall we say, for this spring?
Yeah, so we recently started experimenting with sending our newsletter more frequently and trying to include
Hmm.
more timely information in it. We're just finding that between Seller Central headlines, frankly, we see a lot of sellers aren't able to keep up with all of the Amazon announcements. And so just having a way to quickly get that information out, like sometimes the dashboard gets a little cluttered. I get in there and it's like, oh, we're having this, you know, webinar about something that's very much targeted towards a beginning seller. And it's hard for a seller to keep up if there are five or six different things happening in the dashboard every day. So we
Right.
try to pull out like, hey, this is something that our target audience is probably actually really interested in, or especially, here at Ecom Engine, compliance is a big sticking point for us. We really try to help sellers be compliant, educate them about compliance. And that's something that's an important part of the reason we've had such a strong partnership with you over the years, because we obviously both have the same goal in mind there, just trying to make sure that sellers aren't messing up before they get to the point that they have to take action
Well,
on it. And Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, our highest attended meetup in Boston was when Ecom Engine came to town and gave a talk on your seriousness around policy observance and compliance. Um, it's a conversation that's changed over the years in terms of how do you message buyers and all of that. But the product insert piece came back
Hmm.
with a vengeance
Yeah.
last month in January, in terms of what can you say on an insert, what can't you say, just kind of reinvigorating that whole discussion around how you communicate with other stakeholders in the marketplace or with buyers, right? So you must, every time there's a bump in that kind of debate, you must be, seeing a lot of um, increases in your inbox just for questions and
Hmm.
people who are kind of concerned but don't know how to interpret the policy the way that you would necessarily interpret. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And I will say one thing that I'm interested in with AWD is exactly that. So if you're having inventory that Amazon is storing and they're auto replenishing for you, a lot of big manufacturers have different product packaging for Amazon specifically so that they're not violating guidelines, because some of the best marketing practices that we see out in the real
Mm,
world beyond Amazon are violating Amazon's policies with things like, how you talk about your product or linking to your website and things like that. So it's going to be
mm,
interesting to see how some of these bigger brands handle that if they're using AWD, and how Amazon looks
yeah.
at that over the years, because sometimes I feel like Amazon is a little too strict in some of their guidelines when it comes to especially branding. I think it's just really
Yeah.
challenging to play in that field. So,
Yeah, not everyone has a seasoned compliance employee or staffer who understands all of the laws related to the product that's being sold, but also just a firm understanding of how Amazon will interpret policy pages. Because some of the policies, I mean, it's all over the map, right? Some of the policies are written more clearly, some are less clearly, some are just unclear.
and some
And
automatically like contradict other ones that are in place, which is really challenging,
you don't
especially.
say.
Yes. Or like they'll announce something and then the new announcement kind of overrides something that it will link to a
Yeah.
page that it actually overrides. So it gets kind of complicated. Like I was seeing something floating around about back-end character counts changing for product description.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
scoured Seller Central and I could not find anything official in their documentation. So it's just there's always stuff, you see things that are in beta or people have questions, and
Yeah.
yeah, trying to get to the source of truth can be difficult.
And if we can't figure it out with a couple of hours of poking around, asking around, whatever, how would somebody else? Because we eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff every day.
Yeah.
And I don't blame people. I mean, we always say it's your responsibility to stay on top of monitoring policy page changes. Amazon will never be great at communicating subtle nuances in these policy page rewrites, which may not even really be clear. But by the same token, I understand their pain with keeping up with it, being afraid that your interpretation of a policy won't match Amazon's.
Hmm.
And wasn't that kind of where the whole reviews abuse, buyer messaging, account suspension problem came from like 5 years
Yeah.
ago? Differences in interpretation. And then also service providers, some of them aren't as compliance savvy as Ecom Engine. Um, their interpretations might have been handed to their clients or customers as infallible, golden, the way to go. And maybe Amazon would have seen things differently. You know,
And getting
it's hard
through
for a
to
business
ask.
owner to know.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
talk over you, but
No,
getting
that's okay.
getting
Just,
someone to talk to you at Amazon to clarify something is incredibly challenging. I mean,
yeah,
that's the point that you're doing oftentimes, trying
they,
to handle appeals. And
yeah,
yeah, it's
they don't want to talk about it. They don't want their people to spend time on the calls. If it's an account manager, if you have a paid account manager, which, different rates per month depending on the size of the account. Most of our clients are paying $5,000 a month for the account management program, SAS Core. They will talk to you about it because you have regularly scheduled calls with them. Sometimes even SAS Core reps are on the fence with certain policy interpretations, and they need 2 to 3 days, maybe sometimes a couple of weeks to go to the policy teams and be 100% sure what you're asking them is legitimate in terms of Amazon seller business practice, and then reassure you, and then you can start doing it. There could be a lag. There could be more gray area that never really gets 100% sorted. And you may be like, I wonder if we're going to get in trouble for something. And then what are we going to blame our account manager? Probably not. Are we going to blame a difference in policy page interpretation between the way we saw it and the way Amazon did? Probably not. So those minefields out there are, I mean, I think this is one good reason why you guys have been doing this stuff so long. You've seen so many different things. You adapt based on updates to policy pages. And you also just, I mean, I don't even know how many years you personally have been doing this on a day-to-day basis, but you understand, and Ecom Engine understands the landscape and the communication cues, I guess I'll call it, from Amazon's side. So you kind of know which direction to lead, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other hot tips, things that you think will be coming up in the next couple of months? I know it's hard to predict the future. Things change so rapidly with what you do and what we do. But anything, any kind of words of wisdom or advice you'd like to leave people with, even if it's not a current tidbit, but just something for people to look out for that could be coming down the pike in the next couple of months?
Well, it's a little beyond what you just said, but I recently did a webinar with the Ecom Cooperative, and we had a seller on there who asked, well, how in the heck am I supposed to keep up with all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
You're telling me to optimize my listings, to look out for compliance, to do all of these things.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of room for sellers to adapt to AI and try to use AI to kind of automate processes, especially when it comes to research, products, and even like getting into the design side of things. But I also think at the end of the day, you're responsible for your business. So it is challenging to keep up with it all, but finding resources like both of us offer that will help you keep up with those changes is really important. And the best thing you can do to protect your business is know what you need to do to protect your business and just stay on top of it, because it can change. Like Chris just said, I mean, we're talking in late February, by early May, things could be completely different. We never know from one day to the next. That's one thing that's exciting and challenging about this industry.
One thing I thought of is with the fees changing, let's go full circle to what you first mentioned. Do you think that people spend the next 30 to 45 days absorbing concern and pain and maybe some panic around, oh, the fee changes are impacting us a little bit more than we thought they would for whatever reason, variety of, not so much inflationary economy related, but just, we hadn't planned enough for this. We hadn't carved out enough of an allowance for this in our resources. So it's going to impact or negatively or adversely affect our ability to do A, B, or C. Do you think that's likely to be something that, on May 1st in New York, we're going to hear a lot of people bringing up that maybe they're not talking about today or this week?
I think so. And I also think the increased competition from other platforms, we're seeing more and more, cheaper platforms. You're looking at probably having to raise your prices on Amazon again to offset these fees and make sure you're actually making a profit. But then you're trying to compete with someone that's got the same product for half the price on a different platform. And if you're reselling, or depending on how you're set up, some of the pricing, I forget what the policy is called, but basically Amazon will
price parity, you mean?
Yes. Amazon will suppress your listing if it's cheaper on, like, say, Walmart. And so that can quickly become a problem for sellers.
Yeah.
So I think we're
Becky, always a pleasure.
Yeah.
To talk to you. Thanks again to you and to Ecom Engine for your support for Seller Velocity, which again, many of you already have tickets. For those of you who don't, May 1st and 2nd in New York, go to sellervelocityconference.com. If you have questions, of course, refer to the site or to me. And it'll be great to see any member of Ecom Engine there in attendance in New York. And otherwise, we'll be following up with you soon to keep tabs on everything you guys are doing and everything we've talked about today.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Thanks
Chris.
again.